Very much, Palisa. In less than a month before the general election, the IMF has taken a dim view on South Africa's growth outlook. The global lender cut growth forecasts from 1.4% to 1.2% for 2019, from 1.7 to 1.5% from 2020. It kept growth forecast unchanged in January, but had revised down significantly in October 2018. This is below the Treasury's forecast of 1.5% for 2019 and the Reserve Bank's projection of 1.6%. Meanwhile, the Africa Pulse report produced by the World Bank says the low business confidence that's holding back investment has largely been driven by the slow pace of structural reforms. As a result, South Africa's economy will struggle to grow in line with the rest of sub-Saharan Africa as business confidence remains in the doldrums. Economists say the impact of power cuts on growth, already seen in the first quarter data, show a fall in manufacturing output and a lower purchasing managers index. Can structural reforms help South Africa's economic recovery plans? Well, to answer this is Professor Patric Bond, who joins us now to discuss South Africa's economic woes. Thank you very much for coming, sir.
Thanks, Colin. Good to be with you.
Every time we talk about structural reforms, let's just keep our viewers, apace with what we're referring to.
It depends what your ideology is. So if you're from the World Bank and the IMF, it usually means you cut the budget, you privatize, you go for more export-led growth, you let your interest rate go up. Currency crash. Those are the sorts of Washington consensus commandments that we typically would be getting, especially under the thumb when we're under a lot of pressure. And the three credit rating agencies normally go more or less along that ideological line. Standard & Poor's, Fitch, and this last week Moody's chiming in as well. And it seems to me that's a structural reform that might deform this country even more, because the victims of that typically are working class people, poor people, the environment, women, and we have the worst inequality in the world. And I'd like to see a structural reform that addresses inequality, that gives much greater opportunity for employment. So, as I say, ideological depends what side you're on. I would say their reforms are deforms. They'd say the other way around.
So now the problem here is concern for the poor. South Africa has, about 27.7% living in abject poverty, and this really raises the question: how are you going to create jobs and establish industries that are going to manufacture so that people can be employed and they can be able to pay taxes and the likes? So then, with South Africa's economic growth experiencing a dim forecast now, what does this mean?
Well, it's true. Not just dim, it's negative, because our population grows at 1.25% a year. Thank goodness there's ARV medicine, so the population growth rate has come up. Our life expectancy was down to 52, now it's about 64. But that growth rate, it's pretty moderate. 1.25 is, as you say, less than what the IMF is projecting. I think they're probably right to be pessimistic. So if you say 27% are in abject poverty, I'd say, yeah, the World Bank uses $1.90 a day. That's about 27 Rand at the moment. I would go with 50 a day as the upper bound poverty line that economists would normally look at. There we're really in the 60 to 70% range. People think it's probably around 65. So nearly 2/3 are spending less than 50 a day. And isn't that the crucial thing, is to increase so that people are out of poverty and that they can buy goods made locally.
But you know what, Prof? The focus now, when you talk about South Africa, is the investigation of who did wrong, who stole what, through the investigation, the inquiry into state capture, as well as the PIC. So now, when you're talking structural reforms, whereas the focus has been on investigations, and do we know who's going to be arrested? Do we know how much money we're going to recover?
Well, those are just two PIC, at Bosasa, at the Guptas, 2 or 3 of the sort of sites of looting. But according to Kenneth Brown, formerly Treasury's head of procurement, that's the tip of the iceberg. He's argued that 35 to 40% of our procurement budget is stolen by corporates. Don't forget, in Sandton, we have what PwC names as the world's most corrupt corporates. These are a few, black empowerment guys here and there, but it's basically the white guys. Today we learn more about construction industry corruption. To me, that's where a structural reform of the World Bank and IMF sort, which is privatize and outsource and give the private sector more profits as an incentive, isn't working. It's leading to this kind of patronage system with politicians having favored corporations. So procurement, look, in our universities, we stopped this for our workers, right? The outsourcing of our cleaners, of our gardeners, of our security has stopped. We're insourcing. I just hope the state gets that lesson.
But then, you know, the Pastel report says that the long-delayed structural reforms will help revive investment. How?
You know, that's what they'll always tell you, that the best thing you can do is attract FDI, foreign direct investment. Again, that would be the ideological point, which says, you in South Africa can't do it yourselves. You need some foreign investor. Who are we talking about? McKinsey, SAP, KPMG, you know, Bell Pottinger. These foreign companies have taken us for a ride. And if we just had exchange controls and could circulate the funding, stop the illicit financial flows, particularly the multinational corporates, right? All our big mining houses, mostly multinationals, have been taking to London or Mauritius or Bermuda, then you'd have money circulating inside the economy, and that would be where the redistributive possibilities are. That's a different kind of reform than you get from these guys in Washington. Look, they are having their spring meetings this weekend. That's why there's a lot of, like even Mthuli Mncube, the finance minister from Zimbabwe, giving this amazing gift to the white farmers no one expected. It's to impress the Washington financiers, and then the New York credit rating agencies will be happy. It's a little bit of a scam, and we are not playing it because of the election. Tito Mboweni, our finance minister, may go there, but it's one of those moments, Colin, where the elites in our society are never more distinct from the base. And you see it in Algeria, where they just threw out the president last week. Sudan, we're in the process of doing that. Zimbabwe in January, and then Bekkersdal and all over this country. Anger in this continent at following the export-led model with commodity prices now declining again. It's just not a very good system.
You know, in our next interview, we will have to talk about structural reforms and the comparative analysis of the land compensation issue in Zimbabwe, while we're talking about expropriation of land without compensation in South Africa. But that's to be continued.
We'll do that, Colin.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, we're speaking here to Professor Patric Bond, who is an economist at Wits University. And in other news, United Democratic Movement